Think she even knows what half those wires do. Staff Sergeant Kowalski muttered to Corporal Chun, watching the woman hunched over the communications console. $20, says we're calling in the real techs within the hour. Chun snorted quietly, already mentally spending his winnings as sparks flew from the damaged equipment. Technical Sergeant Nara Voss kept her focus on the tangled mess of circuits and damaged relays, her steady hands working through the maze of connections that had been fried during the morning's power surge. The main communications hub buzzed with activity around her, personnel rushing between stations as reports filtered in about the system-wide failures affecting 3 bases across the region. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen similar dedication to service in your community. The betting had started 20 minutes ago when she first arrived with her toolkit. Sergeant Martinez leaned against the nearby equipment rack, arms crossed, watching her dismantle the primary relay assembly. She looks like she knows what she's doing, but this system's been acting up for weeks. Even the contractor team couldn't figure it out last month. Captain Williams approached her position, his boots clicking against the polished floor. You understand we've got a Priority 1 communication blackout affecting operational readiness across the entire sector, he said, loud enough for the gathered technicians to hear. The regional command is breathing down our necks for a timeline. His tone carried the clear implication that this was beyond her capabilities. Voss continued working, her fingers tracing damaged pathways with practiced precision. The main processor had taken a direct hit from the power surge, but the backup systems were salvageable if she could reroute the primary data streams through the auxiliary channels. Sir, I'll need about 90 minutes to complete the bypass and restore full functionality. 90 minutes, Williams repeated, glancing at his watch with obvious skepticism. The last team estimated 4 hours minimum, and they had to order specialized replacement parts. You're certain you can handle this level of complexity? Around the communications hub, conversations dropped to whispers as personnel positioned themselves to watch what many expected would be an expensive failure. Kowalski shook his head slowly, already imagining the paperwork required when they inevitably had to call in emergency repair contractors at triple overtime rates. The damaged relay assembly came apart in her hands, revealing the extent of the surge damage. 3 primary circuits had been completely overloaded, their pathways burned beyond repair, but the secondary channels remained intact. She began pulling replacement components from her kit, each piece precisely selected for the specific requirements of the military-grade communication system. Corporal Thompson joined the growing audience, settling against a nearby workstation. Think she's even worked on Mark 7 systems before? He asked Chun quietly. These aren't exactly standard issue equipment. Most bases contract this stuff out to specialists. Chun watched her methodically test each connection before making her repairs. She moves like she knows what she's doing, but knowing and actually fixing a fried comm hub are 2 different things. When this thing doesn't work, we're looking at another week minimum before the contractor team can get back out here. The complexity of the Mark 7 communication system had defeated multiple repair attempts over the past month. Its integrated design meant that damage to one component often cascaded through multiple subsystems, requiring specialized knowledge of both the hardware architecture and the military-specific software protocols that govern interbase communications. Voss worked steadily through the maze of connections, her movements efficient and deliberate. Each wire placement was verified twice, each connection tested for proper voltage and signal integrity. The gathered personnel continued their quiet commentary, most expressing certainty that her repair attempts would ultimately fail, leaving them worse off than when she started. The morning sun streamed through the high windows of the communications center, casting long shadows across the banks of equipment and workstations. Outside, the daily operations of the base continued normally, unaware that their connection to the broader military network hung in the balance of one woman's technical expertise and the skeptical judgment of everyone watching her work. Major Davidson strode into the communications center 40 minutes later, his expression grim as he surveyed the continued disarray. "Status report," he barked, clearly expecting to hear about escalating failures and the need for emergency contractor intervention. Captain Williams approached immediately, clipboard in hand. "Sir, we have Technical Sergeant Voss attempting repairs on the Mark 7 system. She estimates another 50 minutes for completion, but given the complexity of the damage, I recommend we contact Fletcher Communications for emergency deployment of their specialist team." Davidson's eyes moved to where Voss continued working, now deep inside the main console with components scattered across her organized workspace. "Has she worked on Mark 7 systems before?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer would be inadequate. "Unknown, sir," Williams replied. "But this level of cascade failure typically requires factory-certified technicians with specialized diagnostic equipment. We're risking further damage to critical infrastructure if we let her continue without proper oversight." The whispered conversations among the gathered personnel grew more pointed as word spread about the Major's arrival. Sergeant Martinez nudged Kowalski with his elbow. "Told you this was overhead. Now it's going to be Davidson's problem when the whole system crashes completely." Kowalski watched Voss carefully remove another damaged circuit board, her movements still steady despite the increasing pressure and scrutiny. "She's been at it for almost an hour and hasn't asked for help once. Either she really knows what she's doing, or she's too stubborn to admit she's in over her head." The complexity of her task became more apparent as she worked deeper into the system's core components. The Mark 7's integrated design meant that replacing damaged circuits required recalibrating multiple subsystems simultaneously, a process that demanded intimate knowledge of both the hardware specifications and the military communication protocols that govern data routing between bases. Corporal Thompson positioned himself where he could see her work more clearly. "Look at all those circuit boards she's pulled out. How's she even going to remember where they all go back? This thing's going to be completely scrambled when she's done." Chen shook his head slowly, watching her methodically test each replacement component before installation. The last contractor team spent 2 days just mapping out the damaged pathways. She's been here an hour and thinks she can just wing it. We're going to be without communications for a week when this goes sideways. Major Davidson approached her workstation directly, his presence immediately commanding attention from everyone in the vicinity. "Sergeant Voss," he said firmly, "I need you to understand that we cannot afford any experimentation with this equipment. These systems are critical to operational readiness across 3 installations." Voss looked up from her work, wiping her hands on a clean cloth before responding. "Sir, I understand the criticality. I've isolated the damaged components and verified the integrity of the replacement pathways. The system will be fully operational within the estimated time frame." Davidson studied the scattered components and complex wiring visible through the open console panels. "This is specialized equipment, Sergeant. The manufacturer's own technical team couldn't resolve similar issues at Fort Harrison last month without bringing in additional diagnostic hardware. Are you certain you have the necessary expertise for this level of repair?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, clearly audible to the dozen personnel who had found reasons to remain in the communications center. Several exchanged meaningful glances, their expressions conveying shared certainty that Davidson was asking the obvious question they had all been thinking. Voss returned to her work, her response measured and professional. "Sir, I'm confident in my assessment and repair methodology. The cascade failure followed predictable pathways, and the replacement components are within specification for the required operational parameters." Sergeant Martinez leaned closer to his companions, speaking just loud enough for nearby personnel to hear. "She sounds confident, but confidence doesn't fix fried circuits. When this thing fails its startup sequence, Davidson's going to have some serious explaining to do to regional command." The afternoon light shifted through the windows as Voss continued her systematic approach to the complex repair. Around her, the skeptical audience maintained their vigil, most expecting to witness an expensive failure that would justify their doubts about letting support personnel attempt repairs beyond their apparent qualifications. Thompson checked his watch and shook his head. "Another hour of this, and we'll be into the evening shift changeover. If she hasn't figured it out by now, she's not going to. Someone needs to pull the plug before she makes things worse. The secure phone rang at Major Davidson's position, its sharp tone cutting through the ambient noise of the communications center. He answered immediately, his voice dropping to urgent whispers that carried just far enough for nearby personnel to catch fragments about operational delays and regional command's growing impatience. 30 minutes, Davidson said into the phone, glancing toward Voss's position. Yes, sir. I understand the priority. We'll have an update within 30 minutes. He ended the call and approached Captain Williams with obvious tension. Regional Command is implementing emergency protocols. If we don't have communications restored within the hour, they're activating backup command structures and rerouting all sector traffic through Fort Marshall. Williams consulted his clipboard, clearly uncomfortable with the escalating pressure. Sir, that would mean acknowledging a complete infrastructure failure at our installation. The operational impact reports alone would require extensive justification to higher command. Around the communications hub, the gathered personnel absorbed this new information with growing certainty that Voss's repair attempts were heading toward spectacular failure. Kowalski turned to Chun with a knowing expression. Told you this was going to blow up. When Regional Command starts asking questions about why we let a tech sergeant mess with critical infrastructure, Davidson's going to be looking for someone to blame. Chun watched Voss work through what appeared to be increasingly complex repairs, components, and testing equipment, now covering every available surface around her workstation. She's been at this for over an hour, and we're still dead in the water. How long before someone with actual authority steps in and calls the professionals? The Mark 7 Systems diagnostic panel flickered intermittently, showing error codes that seemed to multiply rather than diminish as her work progressed. Sergeant Martinez positioned himself where he could see the status displays clearly. Look at those error messages. She's got twice as many fault indicators now as when she started. This thing is completely scrambled. Corporal Thompson moved closer to get a better view of her progress. Those circuit boards she's been swapping out, half of them are sitting there unused. Either she ordered the wrong parts or she doesn't know what she's actually replacing. We're going to need a complete system rebuild when this is over. Major Davidson returned to Voss's workstation, his demeanor reflecting the increased pressure from higher command. Sergeant, I need a realistic assessment of your progress. Regional Command is implementing contingency protocols based on our current communication status. Can you guarantee restoration within the next 25 minutes? Voss paused in her work, looking up at Davidson with steady composure despite the obvious pressure. Sir, the primary relay restoration is complete, and I'm beginning final system integration. Startup sequence will commence in approximately 15 minutes, with full operational status achieved within your time frame. Davidson studied the complex array of components still scattered across her workspace, his expression skeptical. Sergeant, I need you to understand that if this system fails its startup sequence, we'll be facing a complete operational review. Are you absolutely certain these repairs will hold under full operational load? The weight of his question settled over the communications center like a heavy blanket. Every person within earshot understood the implications. A failed repair attempt would trigger investigations, paperwork, and explanations that would follow everyone involved up the chain of command. Kowalski leaned against a nearby equipment rack, his voice carrying clearly to the assembled crowd. 25 minutes to bring online a system that's been down for hours. The contractor team wouldn't even commit to a timeline that aggressive, and they wrote the manual on these systems. Sergeant Martinez checked his watch again, shaking his head slowly. If she's wrong about this, we're looking at days without communications while they bring in a complete replacement system. Regional Command doesn't mess around when infrastructure failures affect operational readiness. The diagnostic screens continued their intermittent flickering as Voss worked through what appeared to be final connection protocols. Her movements remained methodical and precise, but the complexity of the task was evident in the sheer number of components that had required replacement or recalibration. Williams approached Davidson's position, speaking quietly but audibly to nearby personnel. Sir, I recommend we prepare emergency protocols for communications rerouting. If her repair attempt fails, We'll need immediate backup systems operational to maintain our connection with regional command. Davidson nodded grimly, his attention divided between Voss's continued work and the operational pressures mounting from higher authority. The next 20 minutes would determine whether a technical sergeant's confidence was justified or whether their installation would face the consequences of a failed infrastructure repair that should have been left to certified specialists. Around the communications center, personnel maintained their positions as witnesses to what many expected would be a costly demonstration of overconfidence meeting complex reality. Colonel Morrison's arrival sent a ripple of tension through the communications center that was immediately felt by every person present. His rapid stride and grim expression left no doubt about the severity of the situation as he approached Major Davidson's position with obvious urgency. "Major," Colonel Morrison said without preamble, "I just finished a very uncomfortable conversation with General Hawkins at Regional Command. They're initiating Protocol 7 if we don't have full communications restored within 15 minutes. That means complete operational transfer to Fort Marshall and a formal investigation into infrastructure failure at this installation." Davidson's face went pale as he absorbed the implications. Protocol 7 hadn't been implemented in over 5 years, and it meant acknowledging complete communications failure requiring external oversight. "Sir, Technical Sergeant Voss is completing final integration procedures. She's indicated full restoration within a time frame." Morrison's gaze moved to where Voss continued working, now surrounded by diagnostic equipment and testing devices that painted a picture of extensive system complexity. "Has she provided any verification of successful integration, or are we operating on optimism at this point?" The gathered personnel exchanged meaningful glances as they absorbed the gravity of Protocol 7 implementation. Sergeant Martinez spoke quietly to his companions, but his words carried clearly through the tense atmosphere. Protocol 7 means they bring in a full investigation team. Everyone who signed off on letting her attempt this repair is going to be answering some very uncomfortable questions. Kowalski nodded grimly, watching Voss work through what appeared to be increasingly complex diagnostic procedures. 15 minutes to restore a system that's been down for hours, with the entire chain of command breathing down our necks. If she's wrong about this timeline, we're all going to be explaining our decisions to people who don't appreciate optimistic estimates. Captain Williams approached Morrison's position with obvious reluctance. "Sir, given the critical nature of the situation, I recommend we prepare contingency communications through the backup satellite array. If Sergeant Voss's repair attempt fails, we'll need immediate alternative communications to prevent complete operational isolation." Morrison's expression reflected the impossible position they faced. The backup satellite system would provide minimal functionality compared to the Mark 7's capabilities, and acknowledging its use would essentially confirm the failure of their primary infrastructure to higher command. Corporal Thompson moved closer to observe Voss's work, noting the complexity of the final integration procedures. "Look at all those diagnostic screens she's running. Half of them are showing error codes I've never seen before. Either she's performing some kind of advanced troubleshooting, or she's in way over her head and doesn't know it yet." Chin studied the multiple testing devices connected to various system components. The contractor team used maybe half that much diagnostic equipment when they were here last month, and they couldn't get the system stable. She's either running procedures they never thought of, or she's throwing everything at the wall hoping something works. The secure phone rang again at Morrison's position, its urgent tone causing everyone in the vicinity to freeze momentarily. Morrison answered immediately, his responses consisting of terse confirmations and timeline acknowledgments that clearly indicated increasing pressure from regional command. "Understood," Morrison said into the phone. "Yes, sir, 15 minutes confirmed. We'll have definitive status within that time frame." He ended the call and turned to Davidson with visible strain. That was General Hawkins personally. "Protocol 7 implementation begins automatically if we miss this deadline. No extensions, no explanations, no second chances." The weight of complete institutional failure settled over the communications center like a suffocating blanket. Protocol 7 meant not just communications rerouting, but formal acknowledgement that their installation had failed to maintain critical infrastructure, triggering investigations that would affect careers and operational assignments throughout the command structure. Voss continued her systematic approach to the final integration procedures, her movements still steady despite the increasing pressure and scrutiny from senior officers. The diagnostic equipment around her workstation hummed and clicked as multiple systems ran simultaneous verification protocols. Sergeant Martinez checked his watch and shook his head slowly. 12 minutes left and counting. If those diagnostic systems don't start showing green across the board in the next few minutes, we're looking at the biggest operational failure this base has seen in years. Williams positioned himself where he could monitor both Voss's progress and Morrison's obviously strained demeanor. Sir, should I initiate preliminary procedures for satellite backup activation? If we need to switch systems, the transition will require several minutes of setup time. Morrison watched Voss work through what appeared to be final system checks, his decision carrying implications that would affect everyone present. The next few minutes would determine whether a technical sergeant confidence was justified or whether their entire installation would face the consequences of a catastrophic infrastructure failure that should have been prevented through proper protocol adherence. 8 minutes remaining. The digital countdown on Morrison's watch seemed to pulse with malevolent energy as he stood rigidly beside Davidson, both officers watching Voss navigate through what appeared to be increasingly complex final procedures. The diagnostic screens around her workstation flickered between multiple status displays, none of which showed the solid green indicators that would signal successful restoration. Sergeant, Morrison said, his voice carrying the weight of institutional authority, I need absolute confirmation of your timeline. Regional Command has begun preliminary Protocol 7 procedures. Once those reach implementation threshold, there is no reversal regardless of subsequent system status. Voss looked up from her work, her hands still positioned over the primary control interface. Sir, system integration is proceeding according to specifications. Final verification protocols will complete within the designated time frame, followed immediately by full operational startup. Davidson stepped closer, his expression reflecting the impossible pressure of the situation. Sergeant Voss, I need you to understand that if this system fails its startup sequence, every person in this room will be facing formal review boards. Are you willing to stake your career on the certainty of these repairs? The question hung in the air like an accusation, clearly audible to every person gathered in the communication center. The implications were unmistakable. Failure would mean not just operational consequences, but personal and professional destruction for everyone who had allowed her to attempt the repair. Kowalski turned to Chun with barely concealed frustration. 6 minutes left, and she's still running diagnostics. The contractor team wouldn't even attempt a startup sequence without at least an hour of verification testing. She's about to find out why professionals take their time with critical systems. Chun watched the multiple diagnostic screens cycle through complex status checks, each display showing different aspects of the system's condition. Look at those error cues. She's got warning indicators on half the subsystems. Either those are normal startup conditions, or this thing is about to fail spectacularly when she tries to bring it online. Sergeant Martinez positioned himself where he could see both the diagnostic displays and Morrison's increasingly tense demeanor. 5 minutes to either pull off a miracle or watch this entire installation get placed under external oversight. I've never seen Protocol 7 implemented, but I've heard stories about what happens to command structures when it goes into effect. The secure communication line buzzed with an incoming priority message, causing Morrison to answer immediately with obvious reluctance. Morrison here. Yes, sir, I understand. 5 minutes confirmed. We'll have definitive status within that time frame. His responses became increasingly terse as the conversation continued. Corporal Thompson moved closer to observe Voss's final procedures, noting the complexity of the system checks she was performing. She's running verification protocols on components that weren't even part of the original damage assessment. Either she found problems the contractor team missed, or she's second-guessing her own work because she knows she's in over her head. Williams approached Morrison's position as the colonel ended his call, clearly preparing for the worst-case scenario. "Sir, I prepared preliminary satellite backup activation procedures. If we need to implement emergency communications, I can have basic connectivity established within 2 minutes of your authorization." Morrison's expression reflected the terrible choice they faced. Activating backup systems would essentially acknowledge failure before Voss completed her work, but waiting risked complete communications blackout if her repairs failed. The Protocol 7 timeline left no room for contingencies or second attempts. Voss began what appeared to be final system preparation procedures, her movements deliberate and methodical despite the crushing pressure from senior officers and the gathered audience of skeptical personnel. The diagnostic equipment around her workstation continued its complex verification processes, each screen displaying different aspects of the system's readiness status. For minutes remaining, Davidson checked his watch again, the numbers seeming to move with relentless inevitability toward the Protocol 7 implementation threshold. "Sergeant," he said, his voice tight with strain, "whatever happens in the next few minutes, I need you to understand that we've reached the point where there are no alternatives. This system either works perfectly on first startup, or we face consequences that will affect this entire installation." The gathered personnel absorbed the finality of Davidson's statement with growing certainty that they were about to witness either an unprecedented technical achievement or a catastrophic failure that would redefine their professional futures. The next few minutes would determine whether optimism could overcome the complex realities of advanced military communication systems. Kowalski shook his head slowly, his voice carrying clearly through the tense atmosphere. "For minutes to start up a system that's been completely rebuilt by someone who's never worked on this equipment before. We're about to find out if confidence can substitute for experience when the stakes are this high." 2 minutes. Morrison's hand hovered over his secure communication device, prepare to make the call that would implement Protocol 7 and acknowledge complete infrastructure failure. His eyes remained fixed on Voss as she began what appeared to be final startup procedures, her fingers moving across control interfaces with practiced precision that seemed incongruous with the chaos surrounding her. "Sir," Williams said quietly, approaching Morrison's position with obvious reluctance, "I recommend we initiate satellite backup procedures immediately. If her startup sequence fails, we'll need those systems online to maintain any communication with Regional Command during the Protocol 7 transition." Morrison's jaw tightened as he weighed the impossible decision. Activating backup systems would signal defeat before Voss completed her work, but waiting risked complete communications blackout that would make the situation exponentially worse. Regional Command expects either full restoration or immediate backup implementation. There's no middle ground at this point. Davidson positioned himself directly behind Voss's workstation, his presence adding obvious pressure to an already critical situation. "Sergeant," he said, his voice strained with tension, "I need you to abort this startup sequence if you have any doubt whatsoever about system stability. We cannot afford a failed startup that damages additional components." Voss's hands paused momentarily over the primary startup controls, the weight of institutional failure hanging in the balance of her next actions. "Sir, all diagnostic protocols indicate successful integration. System startup will proceed according to established parameters with full operational capability achieved within 90 seconds of initialization." Kowalski turned to Chun with barely controlled frustration, his voice carrying clearly through the tense atmosphere. 90 seconds to find out if we're heroes or if we're all getting reassigned to the worst postings the military can find. I've never seen anyone bet their entire career on a single button press. Chun watched the diagnostic screens that continued displaying complex status information, most of which remained meaningless to personnel without specialized technical training. "Look at those system readouts. Half of them are still showing amber warnings. Either those cleared during startup or this thing crashes harder than anything we've seen before. The gathered personnel formed an involuntary semicircle around Voss's workstation, their positions reflecting both curiosity and the instinctive desire to witness what many expected would be a spectacular failure. Sergeant Martinez checked his watch again, shaking his head slowly. 1 minute 30 seconds before Morrison has to make the call to Regional Command. Either she's about to pull off the impossible, or we're about to discover why specialized contractors exist. Thompson moved closer to observe the startup sequence preparations, noting the complexity of the procedures Voss was following. She's running pre-startup protocols I've never seen before. Either she knows something about these systems that the rest of us missed, or she's improvising procedures because she doesn't know the standard ones. Morrison's secure phone buzzed with an incoming priority call, forcing him to answer while maintaining visual contact with Voss's critical work. Morrison here. Yes, sir. 1 minute 40 seconds remaining. Understood. Full status report immediately upon completion or failure. He ended the call and turned to Davidson with obvious strain. That was General Hawkins directly. He's personally monitoring this situation and expects immediate notification regardless of outcome. The pressure of direct general oversight settled over the communications center like a physical weight. Protocol 7 implementation under general observation meant that failure would trigger consequences extending far beyond their individual careers or installation operations. Voss began the actual startup sequence. Her movements steady despite the crushing pressure from senior officers and the knowledge that dozens of skeptical eyes were watching every action. The primary control interface came alive with cascading status indicators as multiple subsystems began their initialization procedures. Williams positioned himself where he could monitor both the startup progress and Morrison's increasingly tense demeanor. Sir, satellite backup systems are prepared for immediate activation if needed. I can have basic communications online within 30 seconds of your authorization. 50 seconds remaining. Davidson's voice carried the weight of absolute finality as he addressed Voss directly. Sergeant, if any system indicators show failure during this startup sequence, I'm ordering immediate shutdown and backup system implementation. We cannot risk additional damage that would extend our recovery timeline beyond acceptable parameters. The diagnostic screens began displaying rapid sequences of status checks as the Mark 7 system initiated its complex startup procedures. Each subsystem reported its condition through cascading displays of technical information that painted a real-time picture of either approaching success or imminent failure. Kowalski watched the startup sequence with growing certainty that they were about to witness catastrophic system failure. 30 seconds to either vindicate her confidence or prove that some repairs should never be attempted without proper contractor oversight. We're about to find out if optimism can overcome engineering reality when the stakes are institutional survival. The Mark 7 system came online with a subtle hum that gradually built into the steady operational tone that indicated full functionality. One by one, the diagnostic screens transitioned from amber warnings to solid green confirmations as each subsystem reported successful initialization and integration with the primary network. For 15 seconds, absolute silence filled the communication center as everyone present absorbed the implications of what they were witnessing. The complex startup sequence had proceeded flawlessly, with every major component reporting operational status within normal parameters. Morrison stared at the primary status display, his expression shifting from prepared disappointment to cautious disbelief. The main screen showed full network connectivity with all 3 regional installations, priority channels operational, and system performance metrics within acceptable ranges. My God, Davidson whispered, his voice barely audible as he studied the cascade of green status indicators flowing across multiple monitoring screens. It's actually working. Full operational status across all primary and backup channels. Kowalski turned to Chun with obvious shock, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging amazement. She did it. The whole system is online and stable. I don't understand how. but every diagnostic is showing normal operation. Chin stared at the status displays, struggling to reconcile what he was seeing with his certainty that the repair attempt would fail. Those are full green indicators across the board. Primary communication channels, backup systems, emergency protocols, everything is operational. How did she manage integration this complex in under 2 hours? The secure phone rang at Morrison's position, its urgent tone now carrying different implications as he answered with obvious relief. Morrison here. Yes, sir. Full operational status confirmed. All systems online and stable. Regional connectivity restored with normal performance parameters. The conversation continued for several minutes as Morrison provided detailed status reports to General Hawkins, his responses reflecting the dramatic shift from anticipated failure to unexpected success. The Protocol 7 implementation was immediately canceled, preventing the institutional consequences everyone had feared. Sergeant Martinez approached Voss's workstation, his earlier skepticism replaced by professional curiosity. Sergeant, I need to ask how you manage that level of system integration without the specialized diagnostic equipment the contractor teams usually require. That was beyond anything I've seen from standard repair procedures. Voss began organizing her tools and equipment, her manner remaining professional despite the obvious relief surrounding her successful completion. The Mark 7 systems follow predictable failure patterns when subjected to power surge damage. Once you identify the cascade pathways, replacement and integration become straightforward if you understand the underlying architecture. Thompson studied the operational displays, showing steady performance across all system functions. Straightforward, she says. The last contractor team spent 3 days just mapping the damage patterns and still couldn't guarantee successful repair. You completed full restoration in under 2 hours. Williams approached Morrison's position as the colonel finished his conversation with Regional Command. Sir, should I stand down the satellite backup systems and return to normal operational procedures? It appears Sergeant Voss's repairs have exceeded all performance expectations. Morrison nodded, his demeanor reflecting the dramatic shift from crisis management to normal operations. Stand down all emergency protocols and return to standard communication procedures. And Captain, I want a full technical report on how this repair was accomplished. This level of capability needs to be documented and potentially replicated. The gathered personnel began dispersing from the communications center, their conversations reflecting amazement at the successful outcome and grudging acknowledgement that their skepticism had been misplaced. The complex repair that multiple contractor teams had been unable to complete had been accomplished by a single technician in a fraction of the expected time. Davidson approached Voss as she finished securing her equipment, his expression reflecting both relief and professional curiosity. Sergeant, I need to understand how you achieve this level of technical success. Your repair methodology appears to exceed standard procedures by significant margins. Voss completed her equipment inventory before responding, her manner remaining calm despite the dramatic transformation in how she was being perceived. Sir, the Mark 7 systems are complex but follow logical design principles. Understanding those principles allows for efficient troubleshooting and repair when standard procedures prove insufficient. Kowalski shook his head slowly as he studied the stable operational displays. Logical design principles. She makes it sound like common sense, but 3 separate contractor teams couldn't figure out what she accomplished in 2 hours. Either we've been seriously underestimating her capabilities, or she knows something about these systems that the rest of us missed. The communications center gradually returned to normal operational status as personnel resumed their regular duties. But the successful repair had created an undercurrent of curiosity about the technical sergeant who had accomplished what specialized contractors had deemed impossible within critical time constraints. 2 hours after the successful restoration, the communications center buzzed with renewed activity as normal operations resumed across all channels. The Mark 7 system performed flawlessly, handling the increased data traffic that had been building during the outage without any signs of instability or performance degradation. Morrison received another call from Regional Command, this conversation carrying significantly different implications than the earlier crisis communications. Yes, sir, I understand. Full operational assessment required within 24 hours. We'll have complete documentation prepared for your review. Davidson approached Morrison's position as the colonel ended his call, clearly seeking clarification about the new requirements. Sir, what's the nature of the operational assessment? Are we looking at standard post-incident documentation or something more comprehensive? Regional Command wants detailed analysis of how this repair was accomplished, Morrison replied, his expression reflecting both satisfaction and curiosity. General Hawkins specifically mentioned that this level of technical achievement needs to be evaluated for broader implementation across similar installations. The success had created new challenges as higher commands sought to understand and potentially replicate the repair methodology that had exceeded all previous contractor capabilities. Voss found herself at the center of unexpected attention as personnel who had earlier dismissed her abilities now approached with technical questions and requests for explanation. Sergeant Martinez positioned himself near Voss's workstation as she completed final system verification procedures. Sergeant, I need to ask about the diagnostic techniques you used during the repair. Some of those procedures weren't in any manual I've seen, but they obviously worked better than standard protocols. Voss continued her methodical approach to system documentation, recording performance metrics and configuration details that would be required for the operational assessment. The diagnostic procedures follow from understanding how power surge damage propagates through integrated circuit pathways. Once you map those patterns, repair becomes a matter of systematic component replacement and pathway verification. Kowalski joined the conversation, his earlier skepticism replaced by genuine professional interest. Systematic component replacement sounds straightforward, but you were working with circuits that had cascade failures across multiple subsystems. How did you determine which components needed replacement versus which ones could be salvaged? Chun approached the group as Voss explained her methodology, clearly seeking to understand techniques that had proven superior to contractor procedures. The last technical team spent 2 days just identifying damaged components. You completed that analysis and full repair in under 2 hours. The complexity of what she had accomplished became more apparent as personnel attempted to understand her repair methodology. Standard contractor procedures required extensive diagnostic equipment and multiple technicians working in coordination, yet she had achieved superior results working alone with basic testing instruments. Thompson studied the technical documentation Voss was preparing, noting the level of detail in her component analysis and repair procedures. These diagnostic logs show fault identification patterns I've never seen before. Either you've developed new troubleshooting techniques or you have access to technical information that wasn't included in our standard training. Williams approached Morrison's position as additional personnel gathered around Voss's workstation seeking technical explanations. Sir, should we be documenting these repair procedures for inclusion in our standard operating protocols? If this methodology can be replicated, it could significantly improve our technical capabilities. Morrison observed the growing interest in Voss's repair techniques, recognizing that her success had implications extending beyond their immediate operational needs. Document everything, Captain. Regional Command specifically wants comprehensive analysis of how this repair was accomplished. This could affect technical procedures across multiple installations. The successful repair had transformed the communications center's atmosphere from crisis management to technical curiosity as personnel sought to understand capabilities that had exceeded all expectations. Voss continued her systematic documentation while fielding questions from colleagues who were struggling to reconcile her achievement with their previous assumptions about her technical abilities. Sergeant Martinez reviewed the diagnostic logs showing the progression of her repair work, shaking his head in amazement. According to these records, you identified and corrected fault patterns that weren't even detected by the contractor team's specialized equipment. How did you recognize problems that their diagnostic systems missed? Voss completed another section of her technical documentation before responding, her manner remaining professional despite the obvious transformation in how she was being perceived. Standard diagnostic equipment focuses on individual component failures rather than systematic pathway analysis. Understanding the integrated design allows for more comprehensive fault detection and repair. Davidson joined the growing group of personnel seeking technical explanations, his questions reflecting both professional curiosity and the need to prepare comprehensive reports for higher command. Sergeant, I need to understand the training background that enabled this level of technical achievement. Your repair capabilities appear to exceed standard technical specialist qualifications by significant margins. The question carried implications that extended beyond simple curiosity, suggesting that her technical capabilities might indicate background or training that hadn't been apparent during normal operations. The successful repair had raised questions about qualifications and experience that seemed inconsistent with her apparent position as a standard communications technician. The morning briefing brought unexpected developments as Morrison addressed the assembled senior staff regarding Regional Command's response to the previous day's successful repair. General Hawkins has requested a comprehensive technical evaluation of Sergeant Voss's repair methodology, with specific emphasis on determining how her capabilities compare to current contractor standards. Davidson consulted his briefing notes, clearly preparing for expanded documentation requirements. Sir, the preliminary technical analysis suggests that her repair procedures exceeded standard protocols in multiple areas. The diagnostic techniques she employed aren't covered in current training curricula or contractor certification programs. The implications of superior technical capability were becoming increasingly apparent as higher commands sought to understand and potentially implement repair methodologies that had proven more effective than established procedures. Morrison's expression reflected growing curiosity about qualifications that seemed inconsistent with standard technical specialist backgrounds. Captain Williams entered the briefing room carrying a thick folder of documentation, his demeanor suggesting significant developments in their investigation of Voss's technical background. Sir, I've completed initial review of Sergeant Voss's personnel files and training records. There are some unusual elements that may explain her advanced technical capabilities. Morrison accepted the folder, beginning his review of documentation that would provide context for the previous day's exceptional technical achievement. Williams positioned himself to provide clarification as needed, clearly having discovered information that added complexity to their understanding of Voss's qualifications. Meanwhile, in the communications center, Voss continued normal operations while fielding ongoing questions from personnel who remained amazed by her repair accomplishment. The Mark 7 system maintained flawless performance, handling all operational requirements without any indication of instability or degraded functionality. Sergeant Martinez approached her workstation during a brief operational lull, his curiosity reflecting the broader interest in understanding her technical background. Sergeant, I've been reviewing the repair documentation you prepared yesterday. Some of the diagnostic procedures you described aren't included in any technical manual I can access. Where did you learn those troubleshooting techniques? Voss completed her current system monitoring task before responding, her manner remaining professional despite the continued scrutiny. Advanced diagnostic procedures are covered in specialized training programs that focus on integrated system architecture rather than component-level troubleshooting. Understanding system design principles allows for more effective repair methodologies. Kowalski joined the conversation, clearly seeking additional clarification about training programs that seem to exceed standard technical education. Specialized training programs for integrated system architecture. That sounds like advanced engineering education rather than standard military technical training. What kind of background qualifies someone for that level of specialized instruction? The question highlighted growing recognition that her technical capabilities suggested educational and professional background that extended far beyond standard communications technician qualifications. Personnel were beginning to realize that her repair achievement might indicate training and experience that wasn't apparent from her current assignment. Chun approached the group as the conversation continued, clearly interested in understanding qualifications that had enabled superior technical performance. Advanced engineering education would explain the diagnostic techniques, but it raises questions about why someone with that background would be assigned to standard communications technician duties. Thompson studied the ongoing operational displays showing continued flawless system performance, shaking his head in amazement. Whatever her background, the results speak for themselves. This system is running better than it has in months, and she accomplished that repair faster than any contractor team we've worked with. Back in the briefing room, Morrison completed his review of Voss's personnel documentation, his expression reflecting significant developments in understanding her qualifications and background. Williams waited quietly as the colonel absorbed information that would transform their perception of the technical sergeant who had accomplished the impossible repair. Captain, Morrison said, finally, this documentation explains a great deal about yesterday's technical achievement. Sergeant Voss's background is considerably more extensive than her current assignment would suggest. We need to discuss how this information affects our operational assessment and reporting requirements. Williams nodded, clearly understanding the implications of advanced qualifications that hadn't been apparent during normal operations. Sir, the personnel files indicate training and experience levels that would qualify her for significantly more complex technical assignments than standard communications maintenance. The revelation of extensive technical background provided context for repair capabilities that had exceeded all expectations, but it also raised questions about assignment procedures and whether her current duties utilized her full qualifications effectively. Morrison closed the personnel folder, his expression reflecting the need to reconsider their understanding of Voss's role and capabilities within their operational structure. This information needs to be included in our report to Regional Command. General Hawkins specifically requested comprehensive analysis of how this repair was accomplished, and Sergeant Voss's actual qualifications are clearly relevant to that assessment. The growing recognition of advanced technical background was transforming their perception of the successful repair from exceptional achievement by a standard technician to logical outcome of superior qualifications that hadn't been properly recognized or utilized. The afternoon brought an unexpected development as Morrison prepared to conduct a formal interview with Voss regarding her technical background and repair methodologies. Davidson accompanied him to the communications center, both officers carrying documentation that suggested their understanding of her qualifications was about to undergo significant revision. Sergeant Voss, Morrison said as they approached her workstation, I need to discuss your technical background and training history in preparation for our report to Regional Command. There appear to be some discrepancies between your current assignment and your documented qualifications that require clarification. Voss completed her current system monitoring task before turning to address the senior officers, her manner remaining professional despite the obvious importance of their inquiry. Sir, I'm available to provide whatever information is required for your operational assessment. Davidson consulted his documentation, clearly preparing to ask questions that would clarify qualifications that seemed inconsistent with standard communications technician assignments. Sergeant, according to your personnel files, you completed advanced systems engineering training at the Naval Postgraduate School, followed by specialized courses in integrated communications architecture. These qualifications significantly exceed standard technical specialist requirements. The revelation of advanced engineering education immediately attracted attention from nearby personnel who had been following the ongoing discussion of her exceptional repair capabilities. Kowalski and Chun exchanged meaningful glances, beginning to understand why her diagnostic techniques had exceeded standard contractor procedures. Morrison continued reviewing documentation that painted a picture of extensive technical qualifications. Additionally, your training records include completion of several classified programs related to advanced military communication systems. Can you explain why someone with these qualifications is currently assigned to standard maintenance duties? Voss maintained her composed demeanor despite the increasing scrutiny from senior officers and the growing audience of curious personnel. Sir, my current assignment allows me to maintain operational readiness across multiple system types while providing technical support as required. The assignment utilizes my qualifications effectively within current operational parameters. Sergeant Martinez stepped closer, clearly seeking to understand how advanced engineering qualifications related to the previous day's repair achievement. Sergeant, if you have specialized training in integrated communications architecture, why didn't you mention that when we were discussing the complexity of the Mark 7 repair? That background would have explained your diagnostic capabilities. The question highlighted the growing recognition that her technical success reflected extensive qualifications rather than exceptional natural ability. Personnel were beginning to realize that her repair achievement represented logical application of advanced training rather than surprising competence from standard technician. Thompson joined the expanding group of interested personnel, his expression reflecting amazement at the revelation of extensive technical background. Advanced Systems Engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School. That explains how you identified fault patterns that contractor teams missed. You weren't improvising repair procedures. You were applying engineering principles they didn't understand. Williams approached Morrison's position, carrying additional documentation that appeared to contain further revelations about Voss's background and qualifications. Sir, I've located additional training records that may be relevant to our assessment. Some of these programs appear to be highly classified and require special authorization for review. Morrison accepted the additional documentation, his expression reflecting growing curiosity about the extent of Voss's actual qualifications and the reasons for her current assignment to routine maintenance duties. Classified training programs suggested capabilities that extended far beyond standard technical education. Chun studied Voss with newfound understanding, finally comprehending how she had accomplished repair procedures that exceeded contractor capabilities. You weren't just fixing communication equipment yesterday. You were applying advanced engineering analysis to system problems that standard technicians couldn't understand. No wonder you made it look easy. The revelation of extensive engineering background was transforming their perception of the successful repair from exceptional achievement to logical outcome of superior qualifications. However, questions remained about why someone with advanced technical education was assigned to routine maintenance rather than more complex engineering responsibilities. Kowalski shook his head slowly as he absorbed the implications of Voss's actual qualifications. Naval Postgraduate School engineering training, specialized communications architecture courses, classified programs. This isn't just advanced technical background. This is expert-level qualification that should be utilized for major system design and implementation projects. Morrison completed his review of the classified training documentation, his expression reflecting significant developments in understanding Voss's true capabilities and background. Sergeant, these training records indicate qualifications that would typically be associated with senior engineering positions rather than field maintenance assignments. Can you clarify the circumstances that led to your current duty assignment? The question carried implications that extended beyond simple curiosity, suggesting that her assignment to routine duties might not reflect appropriate utilization of her extensive qualifications. The growing recognition of advanced capabilities was raising questions about organizational decisions and whether her true potential was being properly recognized and employed within their operational structure. The sound of boots approaching at regulation pace caused everyone in the communications center to turn toward the entrance. Lieutenant Commander Jake Reeves entered with crisp military bearing, his seal trident gleaming on his dress uniform as he scanned the room with obvious purpose. "I'm looking for Technical Sergeant Voss," he announced to the assembled personnel, his voice carrying the authority of Special Operations Command. "I need to speak with her regarding yesterday's communications restoration and her involvement in the operational assessment." Morrison and Davidson exchanged glances, clearly uncertain about why a SEAL officer would be seeking their technical sergeant. "Sir," Reeves continued, addressing Morrison directly, I'm Lieutenant Commander Reeves from Naval Special Warfare Command. I understand Sergeant Voss successfully restored your Mark 7 communications system under critical time constraints. The SEAL's presence immediately commanded attention from everyone present. His special warfare insignia and obvious authority creating an atmosphere of heightened importance around what had seemed like routine follow-up interviews about technical procedures. Voss stepped forward from her workstation, maintaining professional composure despite the unexpected arrival of Special Operations personnel. Sir, I'm Technical Sergeant Voss. I completed the Mark 7 restoration yesterday and have been providing technical documentation as requested by Command. Reeves studied her for a moment, his expression reflecting recognition that seemed inconsistent with a first meeting. Sergeant, I need to ask about your background and current assignment status. There appears to be some confusion about your actual position and qualifications within this command structure. Morrison stepped closer, clearly seeking clarification about why a SEAL officer would be interested in their technical personnel. Lieutenant Commander, I'm not sure I understand the nature of your inquiry. Sergeant Voss is assigned to communications maintenance duties under my operational authority. Reeves turned to address Morrison directly, his demeanor professional but firm. Colonel, I think there may be some misunderstanding about Sergeant Voss's actual rank and assignment status. My orders indicate she holds significantly different qualifications than standard communications technician duties would suggest. The implications of the SEAL's statement created immediate tension as personnel absorbed the suggestion that their understanding of Voss's position might be fundamentally incorrect. Davidson consulted his documentation, clearly seeking to reconcile official records with the Special Operations officer's unexpected inquiry. Kowalski whispered to Chun, his voice barely audible but clearly reflecting growing confusion about the situation. Why would a SEAL commander be asking about her comtech? And what did he mean about her actual rank and assignment status? Chun studied Reeves's bearing and obvious authority, recognizing that Special Operations personnel didn't typically involve themselves in routine technical matters unless there were significant underlying issues. Something's not right here. SEAL officers don't show up asking questions about maintenance personnel unless there's a lot more going on than we understand. Reeves approached Voss's position, his manner shifting to one of professional respect that seemed inconsistent with addressing a technical sergeant. Ma'am, I believe there may have been some administrative confusion about your assignment and rank structure. My orders indicate you should be addressed with considerably more formal recognition than standard enlisted protocols. The SEAL's use of formal address created immediate shock among the assembled personnel, suggesting rank and status that completely contradicted their understanding of Voss's position within their command structure. Morrison's expression reflected growing alarm as he realized their treatment of her might have been fundamentally inappropriate. Williams approached Morrison's position, speaking quietly but urgently. Sir, if there's been confusion about her rank or assignment status, we need to clarify this immediately. Our interactions and documentation may require significant revision based on whatever Lieutenant Commander Reeves has discovered. Sergeant Martinez backed away from Voss's workstation, his earlier casual interactions now seeming potentially inappropriate if her actual rank exceeded their assumptions. Thompson and Chun exchanged worried glances, both realizing that their treatment of her as a standard technician might represent serious breaches of military protocol. Reeves positioned himself at formal attention, his posture indicating preparation for military courtesy that far exceeded anything they had witnessed during routine operations. The atmosphere in the communications center became electric with tension as everyone present realized they were about to discover something that would fundamentally change their understanding of the woman they had dismissed as a technical sergeant. Ma'am, Reeves said, his voice carrying formal military respect, I need to verify your actual rank and assignment status for proper protocol compliance. There appears to have been significant administrative confusion about your position within this command structure. Morrison stepped forward, his expression reflecting growing concern about the implications of rank confusion and potential protocol violations. Lieutenant Commander, I need immediate clarification about what you've discovered. If there have been errors in our personnel records or assignment procedures, we need to address them immediately. The tension in the room reached breaking point as everyone present realized they were moments away from a revelation that would transform their understanding of everything that had occurred during the previous day's crisis and their subsequent interactions with someone whose true status remained mysteriously unclear. Lieutenant Commander Reeves came to rigid attention, his salute precise and formal as he addressed Voss with unmistakable military courtesy. Commander Voss, sir, I apologize for the confusion regarding your assignment status. Naval Special Warfare Command sent me to verify your location and ensure proper protocol compliance during your temporary duty assignment. The words hit the communications center like a physical shockwave. Commander, every person present felt their understanding of the previous 24 hours collapse and rebuild in the space of seconds. Morrison's face went pale as he realized the magnitude of their error. Commander, Morrison said, his voice barely controlled as he struggled to process the revelation. His own salute was immediate and sharp, followed quickly by Davidson and Williams as they scrambled to correct their catastrophic breach of military protocol. Voss returned their salutes with practiced ease, her demeanor shifting subtly to reflect the authority she had maintained throughout the crisis despite their complete misunderstanding of her rank. Gentlemen, she said calmly, there's no need for concern. The temporary assignment served its purpose, and the communications restoration proceeded successfully. Kowalski stumbled backward, his face showing absolute shock as he realized he had been casually discussing the competence of a senior officer. Chun grabbed the nearest workstation for support, his earlier betting against her capabilities now seeming like career-ending insubordination. Thompson's mouth opened and closed without sound as he absorbed the implications of his casual conversations about her qualifications. Martinez turned away completely, clearly overwhelmed by the realization that his skeptical commentary had been directed at a commanding officer. Reeves continued his formal address, providing context that transformed everyone's understanding of the situation. Commander Voss is currently assigned to Naval Special Warfare Development Group, conducting operational assessments of communication systems and repair capabilities at forward installations. Yesterday's Mark 7 restoration was part of her evaluation of current technical procedures and personnel training adequacy. Morrison struggled to find words that could address the situation appropriately. Commander, I must apologize for our failure to recognize your rank and status. Our personnel records indicated technical sergeant designation, and we proceeded based on that information. Voss maintained her composed demeanor, showing no trace of resentment despite the obvious disrespect she had endured. Colonel Morrison, the administrative confusion was intentional. Accurate assessment of installation capabilities and personnel reactions requires observation under authentic conditions. Your team's responses provided valuable data about current operational procedures. The revelation that her assignment had been deliberate evaluation rather than actual maintenance duty added another layer of shock to an already overwhelming situation. Williams realized that every skeptical comment and dismissive interaction had been observed and documented by a senior officer conducting official assessment. Davidson stepped forward, his expression reflecting both mortification and professional concern. Commander, I need to ask about our documentation and reports regarding yesterday's incident. Given the actual circumstances, our assessment may require complete revision. Commander Voss moved to her workstation and retrieved a comprehensive folder of documentation that had clearly been prepared throughout her assignment. My operational assessment is complete, Major Davidson. The installation demonstrated excellent crisis management capabilities once technical challenges were resolved. Personnel showed appropriate concern for mission success and institutional integrity. Kowalski approached cautiously, his earlier confidence replaced by obvious embarrassment. Commander, I need to apologize for my comments during the crisis. I had no idea about your actual qualifications or the nature of your assignment. Her response showed the leadership qualities that had been masked by their assumptions about her rank. Sergeant Kowalski, your reactions were entirely appropriate for the information available to you. Skepticism about untested procedures is valuable for operational security. Chun joined the growing group of personnel seeking to address their inappropriate treatment of a senior officer. Ma'am, we completely misunderstood the situation. Your technical capabilities should have indicated superior training and experience. The transformation in the communication center was complete as personnel adjusted to the reality of her actual rank and assignment. Conversations that had seemed casual now appeared in the context of junior personnel discussing a commanding officer's competence. If this story moved you, share your thoughts about your favorite moment or character, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when others doubted them. Lieutenant Commander Reeves completed his formal business, providing final context for the extraordinary events. Commander Voss's assessment will be included in recommendations for improved technical training and personnel utilization across multiple installations. Her successful restoration under crisis conditions demonstrated capabilities that exceed current contractor standards. Morrison stepped forward for final remarks, his tone reflecting both respect and lingering amazement. Commander, your assessment has provided valuable insights into our operational procedures. We appreciate your dedication to maintaining mission success despite our administrative confusion. Commander Voss gathered her materials and prepared to conclude her temporary assignment, her manner reflecting the quiet professionalism that had enabled her to complete her mission successfully despite being completely underestimated by everyone around her. The communication center would return to normal operations, but with permanent recognition that appearances and assumptions could mask extraordinary capability and authority.